Sir.
Okay. Matthew chapter 9, verse 14. Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskin. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved." Let's stop there. All right. So, interesting question from the disciples.
And I think the answers are what's so, and that's just what I love about, I think we need to stay in focus about our Lord and the way He taught. We sometimes we need to analyze His answers, but we need to look at them for their common sense answers, because He's talking to, in a sense, like me, a common person per se. And I think that's what blew the Pharisees' mind.
Yeah.
This guy is teaching the people that we're supposed to be teaching. We are on a higher level, but he's reaching. I look at his answers, and they're just so we can understand it, so they can understand it. I think that's what the most remarkable thing about Christ is whoever he talked to, he was at, in a sense, their level, so they can understand. And that's where we, I think, miss the gospel. Now, we need to do a better job to make sure whoever we're teaching, we need to make sure they understand the simplicity of it, and also where we can relate to them and they can relate to us.
How would you have answered this question?
That's a good question.
I was thinking about how I would, and probably in
I can't answer that because I never thought about
it.
It's to ponder on.
Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? Part of me says I would come back with some kind of retort. It's just 'cause. None of your business why. I don't think it would be an uplifting, insightful answer. I think it would initially, it would be, why are you asking?
What would be my problem, and I'll tell you what would, that's why as I ponder on it right here, I guess because I don't really fast. I do, but not with food because I can't, why.
Yeah.
But I fast away from certain things. And I guess before I answer, I would have to remember, why am I fasting?
Right.
That's the key.
Right.
And why, and the Pharisees were asking, so in a sense, you go to the Old Testament, what was fasting for?
Right. And I think we're going to find this whole section here is, why do you do what you do?
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? Because when we go back to Matthew chapter 6, if you remember what that was, it was about fasting and prayers and setting your countenance, and let me get the.
Oh yeah, it's all about riches, worries.
Yeah.
Seeking and not seeking. I can put down. You're right. And when you're doing it, what's the motive behind it?
Right.
You're right.
Right.
That's right.
And so he's really just basically saying it again. In other words, is okay. Well, I've told you before, but let me do this in a different way.
Yeah.
Let me explain it this way. By the way, the disciples are of John, right? Yeah. Not his disciples, right? And I'm presuming it's our John the Baptist, right?
Yes,
I'm presuming that.
Definitely.
Because they're mentioned several times.
Right.
Yeah. So what was unique about the disciples of John the Baptist? What was unique about John's, if you will, thing? What was unique about him?
His message is his.
Yeah, and what was his message? Do you remember what his message primarily was?
Paving the way for the Messiah.
Right. Pray for the man. Repent and prepare.
Change your mind.
Right.
It's no longer going to be the law.
Right. So repenting and fasting they're kind of tied in, because the whole point of fasting is really about acknowledging and remembering what God has done. It's more of a self-reflection time.
Mhm.
It's, if you want to get, in our day, if you want to get an answer from God, if you're seeking God's direction or whatever, oftentimes one of the best ways to do that is to fast, is to get away from the world, whether that's fasting from away the world, fasting from food, fasting from your routine, those kinds of things. You're really, truly seeking
Yes.
God here. That is probably the best way to explain what fasting is to get away from your world and get to God.
Well,
Go ahead.
remember when Christ was being tempted by the devil? Have you noticed 40 days? Again, why? Because it's an example, like you said, fasting is to refocus in a sense, who am I relying on? Christ at that time was still relying, even though he was God, he was still man. He was relying on his Father.
Right.
The devil, but our Father. And when you're the weakest physically is when I guess if you want to refocus, you got to become the strongest spiritually.
Right.
And that's what we battle every day, flesh and blood.
Right. So why didn't Jesus answer with some good Old Testament answers? I mean, why did he not answer based on what was in the Scriptures? Was it because there were no answers based on the Old Testament? In other words, were they fasting, which wasn't part of Old Testament, or
I think the key is verse 15. Again, we got to remember who he was, who he's saying he was, what he came for. I think it's so important that Christ was coming to set up a new game plan, so to speak. And he was.
a new game?
What I mean by that is it's going to be grace. It's no more the law. Because it's almost like, I've heard this expression with the wineskins. It's almost like the pouring out of the old flesh coming in with the new spirit to bring in life. And I think that's what that was Christ's, his whole motive was to help him understand that, hey, I am the new beginning. The law will be, when I die on the cross, there's going to be a new salvation. And I think that's what the Pharisees were missing.
Mm-hmm.
I am the Messiah.
Yeah, I think with answering the way he answered in verse 15, it's basically to say, I am the reason for the fast.
That's right. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If the reason for the fast is here, why would you fast?
Why would you fast?
I mean, the reason for the fast is that you are seeking God's direction. You're refocusing your mind so that you can get clarity on hearing the voice of God. And what Jesus is saying is the voice of God's here. It's me. Why do you have to fast when you don't have to seek something that's right here? Right? I'm the reason for the fast. So, while the bridegroom is here, you don't fast. There'll be a time when the bridegroom will be taken away. Then there'll be a time when you have to, but the focus
yes.
is, yeah.
And add to that point, if you understand the Jewish wedding thing, this, even what you make now makes more sense.
Right.
Because the bridegroom, he becomes, when you get engaged, then he leaves.
Right.
Then he comes back, he prepares a place for you, then he comes back and gets his bride.
Right.
I think just that you struck a chord. That's exactly what, when I leave, then they're going to need to fast again.
They're going to need to fast again, but I'm coming back. Right.
But they're going to, because I will be gone.
Right.
So that makes, so they kind of knew what he was talking about because they knew the Jewish ceremony.
Right. Yeah.
And so then what about the unshrunk cloth and garment? So, I don't know if you guys have ever, when you were growing up, your mom patched your clothes.
Yeah.
Most of my time, my mom didn't sew, rather put the iron on my blue
Right.
jean patches, right?
Right.
And, the funny thing is that they wouldn't last long, primarily because my mom violated these rules. And that was, I had old jeans. They had already shrunk or done the movement of cloth, whatever it was going to do. I get a hole in the jean. She puts a new blue jean patch, which is new, and puts it on. Well, the old cloth isn't going to move. The new cloth starts to move, and it shrinks and tears away, right? And is no longer able to fit, whether you sew it, and that's that sewing part here. So he's, there's this, I haven't come to patch an old system. I haven't come
you hit the nail on the head.
To fix the old covenant by just tweaking the old covenant around.
Keep going, yes,
right? He is the new covenant. He'll say that later as well.
Yes.
That I've not come to,
replace. I come to fulfill.
Fulfill it, right. I haven't come to patch it up because there was something wrong with the old covenant and all we need to do. But I think a lot of times, well-meaning Christians, and maybe even myself, I'll throw that, think that we have to enforce the Old Testament rules in today, right? We got to we got to remember the Sabbath. We got to do all the other things
traditions.
That are right, the traditions, and that's where it comes back down to: is why do you do what you do? Why do we do the things we do? Whether it be a ceremonial thing in our church or the way we walk in our daily lives.
Right.
These are questions we have to ask, and Jesus is challenging, saying, "You don't mourn when the bridegroom is here, do you?
Right.
Christ is here. You don't mourn that I am, by the way, the bride. I'm right here for you.
Right.
You don't have to seek and lament about where the Lord is. I'm here.
Right.
Hello.
But I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And then when I do leave, this is the key. When I leave, don't go back to the old.
Right.
The new is grace.
Right.
You're right. He's showing them there's going to be in a sense there's going to be a replacement. See, people don't understand the law, grace. It wasn't there's no combination.
No.
It's
No
law
combination.
and grace, and you probably, and me too. When I first came to Christ, I became a legalistic.
Yeah.
In Corinthians, what does Paul say? Not all things are profitable, but I can do all things.
Right.
What is he saying? This is what you and I talked about. And this is where Christians get it wrong. And I minister to a lot of people, and they say, "I'm not ready to give my life to Christ." I said, "Why?" Because they're still stuck in the old. Why? Because I enjoy what I do. I said, "You still can do that." What you mean I still can? I said, "Oh, you can." I said, "But when you receive Christ and Holy Spirit, God's going to change it to where you're going to look at it and you're just not even going to. You're not even going to care about it."
Right.
You see, and that's where we're missing the point. We're still trying to dip a little law when we lead people to Christ. And people say, "Well, that's easy grace." No, it's not. He paid the price. You think dying on the cross is easy? I said, when you become a believer, you fully understand Christ's sacrifice.
Right.
And then when you become a believer, we sacrifice. And we should be sacrificed, carrying your cross daily. So that's this whole thing here. You're right. New, old. We need to break away from the old. Now, is the old still good? The law? Yes. If you read Romans and then you read Galatians, is to lead people to Christ, to show them their sinfulness.
Right.
That's the old. It's still profitable for non-believers.
Right.
Yeah.
But you read me later. And when you said it's like perfect. Old, new.
Right.
There is. It's a divide. That cross and that resurrection is a dividing line. Don't mix the two together.
So when you guys are getting, obviously you guys are. I'm not, of course, getting older. So it's obvious.
No, you're just there already, but go ahead.
But do you find that yourself resisting change in life? Things that used to be and you resist. I find that, I'm in the industry that things change all the time, right?
Yes, you're right.
I mean, I'm in that industry. But I find myself mumbling, grumbling, complaining, why is this change? There's no reason to change this. It ought to stay the same. And I think that's kind of a natural tendency of age.
Yeah.
As we get older to not want to change.
Yeah, it's, it has to do with us, the things that make us comfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
We don't, if we have things around us that are comfortable, when things start changing, we get out of that comfortable place that we're in, right? It's like, you have restaurants out there that serve different types of food because of the mood that people are in to eat, right? You have some restaurants that are avant-garde, and you know they're really on the cutting edge of the culinary. But then you have some restaurants that all they do is they serve comfort food, right? And those places are always packed because people are looking for things that just make them feel good about where they are. And I think that's what happens with us a lot, is that as we get older, we're settled in on these are the things that make me comfortable.
Right.
When you start taking those things away, then you start infringing upon my comfortableness. Right? And you start, I start becoming less able to just kind of sit back and relax.
Right.
Things start challenging, and that's, but I think with the Gospels, the Gospel tells us as believers, though, is that, that kind of stuff is going to happen. The key is to have the foundation that all of those things are built on. Has to be the good news, right?
Right.
As long as you have those, those things in our life are going to change, right? Times go on, cultures change, things are going to change. Things are going to change in our direction. Things are going to change against us, right? But as long as we have a foundation that's built on Christ, then when those things do crumble and fall, the foundation is still,
Okay.
is
Can I
really
ask y'all a
sound.
question? Because it's what you're saying is great, and that's why I have a great question. Because music. Okay.
Music.
Now, don't get me wrong.
I'm still missing Beethoven, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And you look like the Beethoven man.
So I'm getting my hair long. for that,
Yeah, I
just
see
for
that.
reason.
He's shaving it too. Because I listen, Nick and I talked about this, but it's even deeper than that now. Because now I'm looking at the other side where people say, let's say like Mercy Me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking Bethel because I'm not a Bethel guy because in Hillsong because they're not godly.
Right. We're talking
Sorry, I'll tell you that flat.
the
They may be
foundation.
godly but not Christian.
Right.
Let's leave it at that. Because of an upbeat, let's say, they call it rocking sense, or they can't, or because they may be in a tour with a person that may be kind of multi. But we deal with people every day that I have to deal with, in a sense, not fellowship but fellowship because we're in the world.
Yes.
Well,
You
they
have to have
can't
a
be. They
relationship.
can't be a Christian band because we got to go back to the 1930s. And don't get me wrong, I love the old hymns. See, you're talking to the old hymn guy. Now, here's my question about change. If y'all can respond, because I'm sure that music changed too. Was there a rebellion when, let's say, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's what I want to know.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was
Because I'm hearing it now.
There was a big, huge fight about bringing the organ
Yes.
into the church.
Yes.
Okay,
Because
okay.
the organ was bar music.
Yes.
Really?
That's where it was an easy
Okay.
instrument to play that you could,
Yeah.
Well, there was a rebellion when you brought instruments into the church.
Even instruments
Because
into the
originally it was all chanting and
Okay, I'm glad I asked this question because I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because I'm a fundamentalist. I'm not a legalist. I'm a fundamentalist, and I'm like, Mercy Me. I don't put them with a lot of others. I give them for example because I really listen to the words, and they're pretty. I mean, Christ is
Yeah.
pretty much almost in probably 80% of their songs. Now, some of the other ones, I get it. They're you got to be careful, but because of their upbeat tune, I think we have to be careful because I'm like, man, they got some good messages out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not Bethel Hill song. So I was asking, so there was a rebellion, let's say,
Oh, yeah.
when the country gospels came. That's different from the old.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can remember in the Catholic Church when the youth started having guitars in our services in the Catholic Church, and that was a big deal. There were people that would not come to the services
Yeah.
where the youth had the guitars because that was
Because
not
of that.
churchy,
Right.
But
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
but going back to the thing that you were talking about change.
Yeah.
Part of the issue, and I think part of what we see in society today is, as in the age that we are and as we get older, we want to keep things the way they are because they make us comfortable. At the same time, there is wisdom that comes with why we do the things that we do.
Why?
And sometimes that wisdom is ignored for being, oh, that's just the way things were, right? And so it gets thrown out with the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And oh, those ideas are passé, right? And so we got to be very careful about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and about understanding that there are things that we do that don't affect our salvation, maybe, or don't affect our foundation, but they're good discipline. They're good practices. They're good signs and symbols, as long as we understand that that's what they are.
So I'll give you an example of
Yeah.
that in my life. On Sundays, my family does not go out to eat.
Mm-hmm.
On Sundays, we do not shop. On Sundays, we do not commerce on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is in the Old Testament, remember the Sabbath. Whatever day, by the way, is Sabbath.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Hello, Christians.
Saturday. But go ahead.
Hello. But I believe the principle behind it, the why
Yeah.
the Lord commanded us to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And to rest, not just take a nap, praise the Lord for naps,
Right.
is to rest from those daily activities.
Sure.
I think that there's wisdom behind that.
Mhm.
And that's the whys that we need to look for.
Yeah.
Everything that we do that is Old Testament related, if I can call it that, has to be scrutinized.
Right.
Personally, you have to ask the question, well, why do I do this or why do I not do this?
Then and you know what? With the scriptures we're reading today, in a sense, we're talking about a lot of things. I kind of can relate to the Pharisees in a sense. I think there were some honest Pharisees. Now, someone want the power, but I'm not the honest people. Like, just for the first time, this is a radical change what he's offering.
Yeah.
And John the Baptist was another one.
Yeah.
This is radical, y'all. So I can understand. Listen, I bet to the younger people in John's day would say, "Oh yeah," and the older people were like, "Wait, what's wrong?"
Right.
Once a year I came and I was all, "What you mean? Now he's a Messiah and I'm just going to change everything?"
Right.
Right.
That was. Now it's a whole different ballgame to a certain degree.
Yeah. It's interesting that our comfort turns in tradition.
Yes.
Tradition turns into doctrine.
Yeah.
And doctrine turns to dogma.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
because our comfortableness leads us to making things dogma, right?
Right.
Because we want to keep things,
Yep.
like they are. So
My
we
way
start
of-
making rules and regulations so that our comfort zone doesn't get
Right.
affected.
Right.
You
And
know.
the why gets lost.
And the why gets
Gets
lost.
lost in all
Yes,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to my ham story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Why do you cut the ends off the ham?
Exactly. Yeah. It's because
Goes
it's
back
what-
to the same thing.
Yeah.
It's what grandma did,
Yeah.
what
'Cause the
my
pan was
grandmother
too
did,
small.
right? Yeah, the pan
And
was
it
too small.
That's
right.
That's funny, but
You
it's true.
lose the why.
You lose
That's
the why.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
right. That's
Yeah.
and
And
we're
I-
all guilty of it.
And I think that's an important lesson for us old folks, if I can call us the old folks here now.
Well, we're getting there.
Is that we have to remind ourselves to ask the why on everything that we do.
Mhm.
When we start to feel uncomfortable, that may be the Holy Spirit saying, you need to check yourself.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with this COVID nonsense that's going on. I mean, in all the new procedures stuff, I have to check myself whether it is it just my tradition to go to Sunday, church on Sunday? Is it that? Of course, for me, I personally have said no. It is not. It is important that body of believers physically get together.
Yes.
To do it. But I did have to go through that reevaluation to think that to ask that question.
Even with daily life.
Right.
The things they're asking. Why am I not wearing a mask? Is it because I'm too prideful, or
Right.
because I've come to the conclusion it doesn't save me, it doesn't help me, in fact it hurts me? You see, you're right.
Right.
Well, yeah, because it could be pride. Let's say that in a sense it was beneficial to wear one, which it's not. But my pride.
Not that we're saying our opinion, right?
Yeah, but no, it's fact.
It's fact.
My pride is not. I'm not putting that mask. But I checked it. I said no, because it doesn't work, and it's isolating everybody from each other.
Mhm.
And that's my whole point. You're right. I think all our motives in everyday life, we have to check it. And if Mickey would see me and he said, "Well, John, why?" and I could explain why, he would say, "Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're not just being a jerk, which I'm good at that."
Yeah. Right. Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's how if you want to witness to people, everybody's always looking
Right. Right.
in the way you act, and a lot of people, I could have a difference of opinion as long as I tell everybody, as long as I try not to be hypocritical, because that's when you can find fault. I may be wrong, but, yeah, but you're not a hypocrite. And then once I get knowledge, hey, my opinion was wrong. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let me throw out something that just hit me. Let's just use mask as right? I agree. They don't do any good. It's
They just don't.
right. It's to make people feel comfortable. It's basically what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a situation where that mask becomes a stumbling block, so how do you handle that?
I already did. I had an elderly woman, and she looked at me, and I discussed it with her, and I said, "Listen."
No. When I'm saying stumbling block, I mean
What's about?
for the gospel.
For the gospel.
Oh,
I mean, I'm talking about
that's different.
maybe ministering to somebody who absolutely agrees that the mask is saving their life.
And then it's no brainer. You wear the mask.
Okay.
That's a no brainer.
And I think that's the point here is
Yeah.
that, you know, we have to be at that point to where if it's affecting our witness,
Yeah.
that we have to be willing to not do things that we would normally do. We have to die to self, right?
Yeah.
All the time.
In order to be a witness for who he is.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing that we have to continually weigh, the thing that we have to continually think about. You know, in fact, I have to give up the right to have a right as a Christian in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
If it conflicts with my being an ambassador for him. And that, you know, even though I may be right in a certain sense, that in some cases, in order to be that witness, I have to give up that right.
But can you back that in scripture? And I'm going to say, yes, you can.
Yes.
Corinthians talking about the meat in the marketplace. And what our point is, which I like to say this, is when we give our opinions, because you're exactly right. Biblically, we can
Yes.
find it in the scriptures where Paul gives an example of it there's not be a stumbling block. We're not talking about the gospel here.
Right.
We're talking about preaching the gospel.
Yes.
That's it. So and that's what I love about the Bible. We can, let's talk, but find it. It's in, I think, Corinthians 4 or 5.
Right.
So just want to tell everybody, I think it's up in there.
Yeah.
That is biblical.
Yeah. I mean, because what did Paul say about that? Paul said, I became who I needed to become
Yes.
in order for me to
That's right.
to present the gospel, right? If
He
you
became a heathen, a Gentile in a
Yes.
sense, and he could be a Jew.
right, in other words, I took interest in, I understood, I had compassion for who that person was that I'm presenting the gospel to, for the sake of presenting the gospel.
That's right. That's right.
And now you don't throw everything else
No,
in with it,
no.
right? You
So
don't throw
yeah.
all the social justice
That's
things
right.
or everything
No.
else in it.
Right.
It is for the sake of
Amen.
sharing the gospel.
Amen.
You know.
Yeah, so Matthew 15:24, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's denying self, take up
Right.
cross.
Right.
And people really, and when we read, especially this fall away from the cross, what people don't understand, what you just said, Paul, a Pharisee Jew, going to Gentiles, oh my goodness. People don't understand that, what that was. If you really understand that, what you said, for him to become, in a sense, a Gentile, he was the,
Oh yeah.
it was like us going to, let's say that we're against prostitution and go on, and that's what we go to.
Right.
And we're there every day.
Right.
And yes, God loves you, it can save you. That's what Paul did.
I mean,
and that's what he's talking about.
Right. I mean, and there was an example of that. Which one of the prophets was it that God had him marry a prostitute?
Rahab.
It was one of the. Was it?
Rahab was the Jericho.
Hosea.
It was. It may have been. It's one of the
Either Nehemiah
the lesser prophets
or
or
is it
something
Ezra?
like that.
Ezra or Nehemiah.
It may have been, I'm thinking Ezra.
Yep.
But anyway, for the for that
That's what it was.
for that exact well, that was a symbol to Israel.
Yes. Because they were
This is
breaking
what you've done.
God's law, and they were idol worshiping.
Let me give you a prime example of what you've done, right? Oh, here's my prophet. Go marry a prostitute. You know,
And then prophesied that she is y'all.
Right.
I mean, that's just
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
That's why you need to read the Old Testament too, y'all, because you can get so much out of it.
right, and I think that's in a sense what you're saying about Paul. That's what, you know, because Paul, right? What was Paul's first thought? Paul's first thought is, I'm going to the Jews.
Yes, that's
I'm
what he
going
did.
to share the truth with the Jews, and Jesus says, getting off that easy, dude. You're going to the
And
Gentiles.
what the best part about this is, well, how did that happen? Because when Paul became a believer, what is the first thing that he's going to the
You
synagogue?
go to
I
the
love
synagogues,
that.
right?
If you remember God, the Lord, when he spoke to us, said, Paul, I got a plan. You're going to the Gentiles. So it's not like, but it's so just like us. I love the Lord because the Lord is so patient. So Paul goes to the synagogues. What do? They try to kill him.
Right.
He said, Paul, I told you.
Right.
So if you're not going to listen to me, I think bodily harm may influence you a little bit. And sure enough, they dropped them down, and I'm gone. And I think that's so. When you read but don't just read it. You read it to learn it and study it. You learn, I think, like you said, then you can lay down your life and give to Him because you see His patience in that.
Right.
So if He has, that's one of the fruits. I will say that's been beneficial about Matthew. Even when we went over I think one of the fruits, and sometimes we're always thinking of the fruit, the works.
Mhm.
But I was missing the fruits of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that really woke me up when we talked about that time. Because I kind of overlooked that sometimes.
All right, so we've talked about the old and how bad it is to hang on to the old.
Mm-hmm.
What about, generalize that, what about the new is always right? The new is always better. The idea that because it is new, that's where we have to head towards. Similar to what you're talking about music.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
But this idea that because we thought of it, it is the best idea ever. Is that the old people just didn't know what they were doing? We've got it down because we're new and hip.
It's not like we haven't been through that before in this church, this congregation, music and all. And I think what the message has to be is, except from the gospel, again, we have to learn to give. I'm with you. Everybody
Give and take.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Give and take.
I was making sure.
And what I mean by that is, and we're all guilty. The older generation. And see, I'm 57. We're all almost the same age. So it's not like, I said people look at you and say, and they shot me. I'm 57 this year. What I've learned is, as long as it's not against the gospel, and it is godly and Christian, it's not their fault because they want to listen. Let's come together. We all need to come together, give and take a little, and that's what's missing in the church today. It is. We're seeing it.
Well, it all has to be measured against the same thing.
Right.
The new has to be measured
Yes.
against the same balance as the old.
That's correct.
Right.
That's right.
Just because it's new doesn't mean that it's better.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it is best. It just
Or bad.
Or bad.
Because that's what
Exactly.
people go. Legalists go bad. It's
Right.
bad.
It's just got to be measured against the same scale,
Right.
using the same scale as the old.
Right.
And if it comes up wanting, then you toss it out. Then it's not good. If it comes up, good, then it's profitable to be used
For that time.
for that time. Right. You continually have to, we continually measure things.
Right.
And as long as the foundation of what they're doing is scriptural and is profitable, then,
Right.
what else can you say about it?
Right. Exactly.
And the scale
So-
is God's glory.
I want to make sure we
Yes.
emphasize
Yes.
that we're not getting rid of concepts of the Old Testament.
No.
Or the activities of the Old Testament, and just like, well, let's just rip that out of the book and we'll only keep the new. Because that's just as bad as the other way around.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
we have to be, and it comes down to what we said earlier on, very beginning, the why.
Right.
Why do we do what we do? And I think it's a great response that Jesus did was, he didn't come back with, here's the answer, but rather, why do you do your traditions that you do? Why do you do your
There's a reason behind it.
There's a reason for everything that we
Yes,
do,
yes.
and that's what you need to analyze. I think that's the wisdom of God, is to always ask that why question. Yeah, I think so. Okay.